First of all, we want to praise God for the opportunity to meet with all of you. We thank you for the blessing of being here, and we ask that the Lord bless all of your families and give us wisdom and strength to grow and nurture our children in knowledge of the Lord, and that we may serve Him faithfully. And thank you for being here, and thank you for Chalcedon for making this opportunity available. Okay, I'm going to do teaching reading first. And we, like I said, this is usually, I take 4 hours to do this, to do both of them. So I'm going to have to fly through some stuff. But there's a few basic things you need to know. The human brain is designed to learn language by God. God invented language, and He designed us to learn language. And it doesn't matter whether that language is auditory, visual, or tactile. Okay, the human brain is designed to learn language. So anybody that tells you you have to wait till they're 6 years old or 10 years old or whatever to teach reading and all this stuff, we found that to be absolutely false. So, how many of you weren't here? All of you were here before except you, right? So if you go to the first one, we talk about the developmental profile. This is the developmental profile is the model I use to evaluate children, and this goes by brain levels. This is a newborn level of the brain, visual, auditory, and tactility inputs to the brain, and major outputs, which are manual function, fine motor, speech and language, and gross motor function. So if you look along here, these are all the parallel levels. This is like the pons level, the newborn level of the brain. A newborn baby doesn't use their cortex. They only use the very lowest level of the brain. And stimulation and whatever wires up the brain to organize it and to help it function in a very organized fashion. But if you miss steps or there's injury, we have to go back and find out the level and stimulate that specific level to help bypass those areas. And so we want to follow the developmental steps, how God created us, to achieve higher level function. So if you're starting with babies, you see these things going on, and we stimulated this level to move to the next level, because the next level of visual development, the next level of auditory development, and tactility development, and so forth. There's a lot, and we move on up the profile because the brain is organized in a very orderly fashion to be what we call neurologically organized. If it's neurologically disorganized, you get dysfunction. You get learning disabilities, you get sensory issues, and so forth. And those can be caused by not going through the developmental steps. It can be caused by illness, injury, reaction to medications or vaccines. Those can all interfere with development at some point. So you'll have to go back to the first talk to talk about the different steps. Yes, ma'am?
I was just trying to make sure I understood you correctly. So if, for example, your child had a problem with eye convergence, which is step 4, you would stimulate at step 3 to get them to move on to step 4? Or would you
Didn't I talk about that last week? We talk about tracking and convergence. I actually have to evaluate the child to see what's going on with the vision, and we have very specific stimulation activities to help bring in that. So yeah, we do the level 3 crawling on hands and knees, because that's where the eyes learn to converge. Okay. All right, but we also have very specific activities. So you go to vision therapist, you'll spend $2,000 to $7,000, and you might get results, you might not. We also include that in our developmental programs. So what I do is I use this model to evaluate children, bring them in, see where they are, and then I give the parents very specific activities to move them to the next level on each of these things because of the concept of neuroplasticity, which is a gift from God. is that you can actually rewire the brain by specific stimulation. There is no scientific argument with that at all. They talk about neuroplasticity. But what happens when you go to the, where's my neuropsychologist? What happens when you go to the neurologist? What happens when you get a label and you're told medication or compensation? You're not given any way to remediate it. The beauty of this system is it looks at the whole brain development and what's influencing each piece. And that's why I do it, because I'm, pretty fanatic about this. And we can overcome dyslexia and autism and ADD and all those crazy labels. I like the ODD one, the odd. They're always coming up with new labels, right? I can do a whole talk on labels. You want to do a talk on labels? Oppositional defiant disorder. Why is your child misbehaving? Because he has oppositional defiant disorder. Oh, okay. As if that's a real thing, So.
Teacher years ago, and I had a child that was labeled with ODD, and I was
Congratulations.
told in my classroom not to touch her, to not address her, and to not let any of the other children touch her because she had ODD. And I just thought it was crazy, so I started touching her and doing what I did with all the other children. And they were paying a psychologist $500 an hour to counsel them and the child. But she was fine. She was just a 2-year-old.
I wish I could make $500 an hour. I know. You're just a rebel. I can tell that.
I touched that child.
You touched the child against the $500 an hour advice of the shrink? Huh. All right. So when you have a child, okay, we'll talk about reading. Reading is developmentally, we want to look at the eyes learn to track horizontally with a newborn baby, and then they learn to track vertically. So with a new baby, you'll start to see them watch you move sideways, and then they'll start to be able to lift their head and track you vertically. And then they get up on their hands and knees, and you'll see them go up and down, and they learn to converge the eyes, all right? So we need to make sure all those things are in place. So throw your baby on the floor and let them crawl and do all that good stuff. I had the obstacle course on the very first handouts, which has all the crawling, creeping, and vestibular activities to help make sure those things come in. And then we reach the point where we start introducing pictures. Ooh, I forgot my pictures. Where's my pictures? And in your handouts, did everybody get the handouts? Do I have the handouts? In your handouts, you have the Lakeshore Learning. These are for babies or little ones. The Lakeshore Learning Building Language Photo Library, which is an awesome system. Actually, one of my parents showed me this. This is 270 cards with simple pictures and the word on the back, all right? This is an awesome thing to start your child on. And so the first step in teaching reading is the visual development after you've got the convergence going and all that stuff, is identifying pictures. How many of you read Glenn Darman's Teach Your Baby to Read stuff? Good. You read it, right? Oh, you didn't? Good. Because he's got 4-month-old there with big red picture or word cards shown, and that's actually developmentally inappropriate. All right. I studied with Glenn Darman. I've been to the institutes in Philadelphia. I adore him, and he was wrong. He didn't even follow his own developmental profile. The first thing we do with children is teach them to identify pictures. What are those? And the Building Language Photo Library is an excellent way to do that. $50, you have 270 laminated pictures. When I was doing this with my son back in 1985, we used to have dumpster dive and cut up magazines and glue the pictures on and laminate them and all this work. 270 pictures for $50 is a deal, all right? So introducing babies to big red word cards is inappropriate because they haven't learned to converge, they haven't learned any of the developmental steps are not in place. So you start with pictures, all right? And once they're identifying a number of pictures, and the kids love them, all right? And we fast flash these. We move them very quickly. And I'll take 5 picture cards. Boom, 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 boom. I'll go, tree, cat, house, and put them away. With babies, you always quit before they want to. Okay, so they're eager the next time you want them to see this, all right? Once they're identifying pictures and really good at that, and of course you're reading to them, you're showing them books along the way. Then we start to teach them how to read using word cards. And we use very, very high-tech things for this. We use index card and Sharpie marker. So once they're identifying pictures, with the brain injured children, you'll have visual issues. We need to work on intensively first. But with my son, by 20 months, he was an automatized reader. He was already able to read because I showed him like 1,000 words between the ages of 12 months to 20 months. And by 20 months, he was an automatized reader. And by 7, he was reading at college level. So that's not because we're so smart. That's how we are designed. And that's how all of our children should have that. Now, in the homeschool world, you're told, we have a literacy problem in this country because they do look, say, and they don't do phonics. How many of you heard that? How many of you believe it? I hear it all the time. I call them the phonics Nazis. You should teach them to read with phonics, not with look, say, because then, it's like hieroglyphics. I mean, I've heard I get followed around and attacked by this. But the children can learn, just like I don't prepare you to learn auditory language. I don't wait till you're developmentally. I just present the words to you in a very simple, clear, unambiguous format. Mommy, daddy. So it's the same way with words.
So you're saying that I don't need to be teaching phonics as first stages in reading?
You what now?
I don't need to teach phonics. I'm just, that goes against everything.
I know.
I'm a phonics girl.
Mommy. Mommy. That's exactly how you do it. You sneaky. Mommy. And you'll do a couple words. Names are usually the ones that kids like the best. I remember I had a 5-year-old girl at my booth at a homeschool show I was doing in Beaufort, South Carolina. She was nonverbal 5-year-old, right? Before she left my booth, she was already reading 5 words, all right? She was identifying and reading 5 words, and I was doing the sight word. And the parents were going, So when you start with the little ones, you start with 2 to 5 name cards. Names are usually the most high interest words. And I don't care how long the name is. Beauregard, you can use whatever. Just show it to them like this. I told you, with babies, you always stop. Mommy. Before they want to. And I used to carry them around in my pocket and I whip them out real quickly like this. We'll get to phonics, don't worry. And I was just having a phonics panic attack, but it's all right. Once they're identifying that first handful of words, I had a little boy with Down syndrome that was 6 years old, and it was a doctor's family, and there were 9 kids in the family. And they came up here from Florida, and he was 6 or 5, something like that. Anyway, I started with the word cards with him. And before they got back home, he knew everybody's name in the family. I said, start with 4 or 5. Well, he didn't want to leave anybody out. So by the time they got home, he knew all 9 kids and mommy and daddy, on the word cards. So then once they identify a couple words, then you start adding. I usually say 3 to 5 a week. Okay, and very casually pull them out and show them to them. And once the stack gets to about 20 words, when you add new words, you retire the oldest words to the vocabulary review stack and put those there. So keep building their sight vocabulary. These are high interest words, all right? These are not like the Dolce words. You know what the Dolce words are? The, from, to. Those are really boring words, right? We want truck, watermelon, pineapple, whatever the kid likes, banana, all right? Pizza, whatever the children like. Those are the kind of words you want to do. Front end loader, whatever. So teach them to read those words and they'll identify them quickly. Once the child is reading a large number of sight words, then we move to what we call teach high interest books. And you have a handout on this.
So how do you tell, do you test them at some point to see if they know the words, or do you just constantly flashing the words? How do you know?
Now you input the information. You can casually test, but I'll tell you, if you test a baby, they will shut down on you and tell you to take a hike. They will absolutely. Every time I have a parent that said, he won't look at the word cards, I know they're testing him, all right? So you can casually throw it on the floor and say, I'm going to get the mommy word, and just grab it like that and see if they identify it. Or hold up 2 words and I said, where's the mommy word? And have them do that. But if you test them every day, they will shut down. What if I went around you all the time and said, what's this? What's that? Blah, blah, blah. That's how we treat kids a lot. So don't test. And that was one of the hardest things for me to do because we're taught to test. Testing is teaching, right? No, testing is testing. Asking what's this is testing. Put that child on their tummy. You're going to bow that back. There you go. Well, you have to be in touch with her and tell her about your trip to Hockman. All right? You weren't here for the Jerry Hockman lecture.
No, we're going October 3rd.
Yeah. So once the child teach high interest books, I had a Montessori school when my son was little because I'm weird like that. And I always loved Montessori's work. And I was always interested in brains and how, why some people are smarter than others and how we learn and what gets in the way and all this. And Montessori had a lot of really good stuff to say about that. And she discovered a lot of things. She discovered that little kids like to learn and could learn early. And if you prepared the environment, they would actually teach themselves. So I had my Montessori school. And I combined the Montessori school teaching with the neurodevelopmental work. And based on that, all of our 3 and 4-year-olds were readers. Every single one of our 3 and 4-year-olds were readers at the school. And we developed the Teach High Interest Books technique. What this is you just take a book with few words. Dick and Jane. How many did Dick and Jane besides me and Debbie? Oh, you did Dick and Jane too. All right. In first grade. Miss Kay Lashley, right. The Dick and Jane are a good sight word because you want to meet a criteria. You want few words separated from the pictures, all right, and large print. So the Teach High Interest book's methodology is put all the words in this book on a flashcard. Make a flashcard. Teach the child those words, and then pull the book out, and the child can read a book, which is totally cool, all right? So I usually say do like one book a week when you're doing this. You can have transition periods, like before you start high interest books, you can do homemade books, you know, from the words that they've learned, have pictures of the children themselves, and, you know, like baby takes a bath, or, you know, out in the yard, or eating breakfast, or, you know, visiting grandma. Visiting grandma is a very good idea. So I use these. I like the, today you have a lot of the I Can Read books. You have a lot of simple books. I love the eyewitness readers. They have very realistic pictures and large print. These are the level 1 books. So I really like these books. Children like reality. They don't like fantasy until they're like 7 and 8 years old, all right? They love to learn about the real world and reality. So I like really realistic pictures. When my son was 4, his birthday party was at a hardware store. So it was a highlight of my motherhood. It's about the only thing I did right. And you can go on. This is an I Can Read book. I must have gotten this at Goodwill or somewhere. But again, you have larger print. You start to go into more and more words this way. Another thing you can do is once they're reading fairly well with the high interest word books, you can do echo reading, which is what I call it. So you would read a line and have the child read that line. Then you read this line and have the child read both lines. And then you read that line, have the child read it back, whatever pace they can keep up with. You want it long enough so they're not just memorizing it, all right? So you want the child exposed to lots of sight words, and this way. So you'll be reading to the child and so forth. And they'll move right along with that.
What about if you're starting with a reader already? You have a child that's reading these.
We'll get there. All right, that's the next level. We're moving up there. Like I said, the Dulce words are really boring, and that's what teachers want to give you. I do have the 1,000-word list that is the 1,000 most common words in English language. And when I'm working with an older child that is struggling with reading, I do have them teach the 1,000-word list so they can actually read pretty much anything once they know all those words. So I usually recommend that at like 25 words per week, sight words, reading that, according to how fast they can absorb the words. I think so too. And echo reading. Okay. Once the child has, and I knew this, I knew it was between 100 words and 1,000 words, sight words. Once a child has between 100 and 1,000 sight words, they intuit phonics. They figure out phonics. They start sounding out words, and you don't expect it. You didn't even have to teach it to them. Sue Buckley, who works with the Down Syndrome Foundation in England, actually did a study and published a paper, and she found out it was 500 sight words. I said, thank you, Sue Buckley. I knew it was in there somewhere. At about 500 sight words, once the child has those, they generalize it. The human brain is amazing. You know, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The child figures out the phonics from just knowing so many words and generalizes the rules from that. She still looks worried. All right, so I see that frown. when, okay, the thing about phonics, teaching with phonics. If you were here last week, you know, what does your auditory processing have to be successful to read with phonics? 6, she remembered. The redhead wins. If I say a sequence of 6 things to you, can you hold it in short-term memory and repeat it back to me? If I say B, 7, pi, 9, tau, x. Can you repeat that? Okay. A lot of people in our society can't anymore. All right? I think the average adult now is 5.5, and it was 7 when I started in this work. So if you have a child, you're teaching with phonics, right? And the child knows every phonics rule in the world. And he sounds out the first part of the word and guesses at the rest. How many of you seen that? That means his processing is 4. He sounds out the first part and guesses at the rest of the word. If the child sounds out the first part and the last part of the word and guesses at the middle, then the processing is 5. When the child can successfully use phonics, the processing is 6. Because you have to be able to hold it in short-term memory and figure out what the sight word is, all right? And that's what you're doing when you're using phonics. Phonics is just a tool to figure out what the word is. And it's not even very consistent in English. But we could speak Italian and it would be very consistent, right? So I think they said Hebrew is very consistent too. I'm not sure. I don't do Hebrew. So that's what you need to know about phonics. So you can't teach a child to read with phonics if the processing is below 6. Not very successful. You'll frustrate yourself and the child. All right. So work on the processing, and then you can give them phonics rules. But most of the kids, I've seen it so consistently. The kids learn phonics. I had a little boy with Down syndrome who learned to read really early, Jet Durkin. His mom has this blog that's read all over the world now. I started with Jet when he was a little munchkin. And and he was 5, I think. And he exhibited that. He showed that he figured out the phonics rules. He was sounding out longer words at a really young age. I think it was 4 when he first started sounding out words on his own. So at 5, he was reading at 6th grade level. Poor little guy with Down syndrome. So anyway, I love it that usually the only babies I get to see are the kids with Down syndrome because the parents expect them to have trouble learning, so I get to play with lots of babies with Down syndrome. And we get them reading early, okay, because they usually have speech issues, and the reading helps with the speech tremendously. Okay, phonics. The other, if you're teaching phonics, I just use a really simple system. I use like Noah Webster's Reading Handbook, which is the old blueback speller. Or I'll show you something else I use here. Once they're reading about 2nd grade level, I start to introduce these books. It's called the New Practice Readers. And this is from phoenixlearningresources.com. And you need that website because that's where we order them from. This is a system, these are adult remedial reading program. And they start at 2nd grade and they go up to high school level. Each book increases a grade level per book. All right? It's just a talker. So it increases a grade level per book. And we use this a very specific way. And you have to do it this way because the kids, this is for reading comprehension. I want reading comprehension to go up. So even though the child could sight read words at 12th grade level, their reading comp might be at 2nd grade level. All right? Excuse me. So we start with book A, which is at 2nd grade level. The C, this is book C, which is 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade level. And we do it this way. You'll see this is a whole lesson. You'll do 2 to 4 lessons a day with the child. We read the vocabulary words to them, make sure they know what they mean. If you're female and you see blanks here, you want to fill them in, don't you? Because girls like to do workbooks. But you don't have to do that. Just make sure they can read the words and know what they mean. The next step is very important. You read the story to the child and they read it right back to you. So you're inputting right at the child's reading level. Excuse me. And then you discuss the story. See these questions at the end? You don't have to do them. All right? You mainly discuss the story to make sure they got the main points of the story. And then you do another lesson. So you read the vocabulary words, you read the story to the child reads it aloud back to you, and then you discuss it. What I do not see is when the child does it by themselves, I don't see the reading comprehension going up like it should. All right? So if you have a child that can read the words and the reading comp isn't up to snuff and they're very stubborn, you don't have stubborn children, do you? Excuse me. They'll want to do it themselves. Don't do that. Insist that they read aloud after you read it to them. If I have a child, this will make you happy because this is phonics. If I have a child that is in the, they're in the 2 to 4 grade level reading, and they just not an automatized reader. All right, I use the Victory Drill book, and it's an old-fashioned book. I haven't started on math yet.
I think that may be your next month.
Huh?
I think that may be your next month.
It might be. I can go over a couple of things with you. We didn't start till late, though. The Victory Drill book is a page of similar sounds. It's like a phonics rule, the A words. And the child has to read through these words and see how fast they can read them. All right? And in the front of my book, it has how many words per minute per grade level. The new ones don't have that the parents have brought to me. And if you want that, I can send it to you. But I use this. I love the bye, 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 bye. I use this as the to automatize reading, all right, and to smooth it out. So as they start going through this, and I use it according to how the child is functioning. If the child can read through, and get okay, I'll go to the next page the next day. Or I might stay on one page 2 days. Or if they're really struggling and I have to echo read a few words at a time and gradually get them through it, I might stay on the page a week. So I adjust how I use the book according to how the child is functioning with it. My goal is find out where they're successful and get right underneath there and keep pushing their level up. So you don't want the child failing at everything they're doing. You want them to succeed, all right? And then keep pushing up that level at which they're succeeding. So I use the Victory Drill book with very good success at that. And they also learn the phonics lesson at the same time, which is wonderful. I think they had this at Homeschool Hangout. It's originally where I got it. You familiar with Homeschool Hangout in Roswell? Yeah, the Bergs are old friends of ours.
Okay, the 2 books you showed are the 2 different books. One's for comprehension, one's for drilling words, right? So I could use those in conjunction with one another, correct?
Yeah, I use them as separate activities. Right. One time I'll do 2 to 4 stories in the readers, and there's 3 different sets in this on the Phoenix Learning Resources. There's new practice readers, reading about science, and reading for comprehension. So I use all those different books. And the Victory Drill book is just to speed up. See it, say it, see it, say it, see it, say it, see it, say it. Okay? I have kids that were taught to read with phonics, and they can't get past that. K, a, t, the, I have to actually make them quit using phonics and do the see it, say it. See it, say it, see it, say it. And move them past that. Because the brain needs to sight read. All right. Whereas, all right, are you ready? What did that say? Did you sight read it or did you sound it out? You sounded it out. You're just a rebel. We all sight read. We all sight read, okay? So just get over it. And it's the same way. I can take anything and show you. We sight read. What about syntax and grammar? Syntax and grammar comes in at about 10th grade reading comprehension level, as does spelling. All right, and I have a specific way of teaching spelling if you have to survive spelling tests. How many of you learn to spell using spelling tests? No, how many of you learn to spell using spelling tests? No. Spelling is a visual sequential process. Andrew Puda was wrong about this. But when you spell something, what do? You want to know if it's right or wrong. You write it down and look at it. All right? So it's a visual sequential process. And we teach it visually. Andrew Puda says it's an auditory sequential process, and he's wrong. All right? Sorry, Andrew. But anyway, who knows who Andrew Puda is? Okay. Syntax and grammar, you don't have to do Shirley grammar. You don't have to start with that in elementary school. You don't have to parts of speech. That's silly. Once the reading level is at 10th grade level, you can teach grammar in 2 or 3 months. All right? Just get that high school grammar book you used to have, go through and teach them the parts of speech. And you know the best way to teach it? Diagramming sentences. Who loves diagramming sentences? Who knows how to diagram sentences? We have some lessons to learn. Go, who is it? What's that book I recommend on? Sentence diagramming, I have to look it up. Sentence diagramming gives you a visual representation of the relationships of the parts of speech. So it's a really good way to teach grammar. All right. Otherwise, memorizing all those spelling rules and those grammar rules, you're not going to remember that stuff past the test. All right. But with sentence diagramming, you actually have to know the relationship of the words. The other thing you need to do is make sure your children hear excellent language. Excellent language is not on Facebook. It is not on TV. It is not on billboards. We are surrounded by a sea of bad grammar. So go, bookshouldbefree.com. It's free classic books on MP3 you can download for free. Download them to an MP3 player and have your children listen to lots of really good language, old books. How many of you correct people's grammar on Facebook?
don't.
But you want to. I correct your grammar while I hear you talking, right? So it's my mother. My mother's in my ears, all right? She's correcting my grammar as I go along. Narration. Narration is another way to work on auditory processing. Is another way to make sure the child's paying attention to you. Are you familiar with Charlotte Mason's work? Charlotte Mason does an excellent work on. I really like her stuff. As far as you read to the child, you can read to the children from all levels, and they narrate back what they heard. Okay, and they narrate back what they heard according to their level of understanding and development. I talked last week about the family. The kids had severe learning disabilities, couldn't read at all, but their processing was 7 because their dad read to them every night for 2 hours. And he read from the babies up to the 12-year-old Moby Dick. He didn't read baby books. He read high-level language to the children, and they heard it. So that's how the children learned high-level language. So don't dumb things down for your kids. All right, they'll pick them up. They're smarter than we are. I mean, they're smarter in the sense that they can absorb things. They can also memorize things better. And if you ever teach them diligently. Who's that guy? Teach them diligently. Huh?
I'm wearing their shirt right now.
Teach them diligently?
Yeah, I'm wearing their shirt right now.
Who's it by?
I don't remember. I'm just.
Huh?
This homeschool convention, Teach Them Diligently.
Teach them diligently by, what's his name?
I don't remember.
He's been at our church. Anyway, I cried after I read that book because I wish I had my son memorize more scripture. Little kids memorize things easily, quickly, and it also grows their syntax, grammar, language, processing abilities. So have your kids memorize stuff. Our whole society, our whole educational system is against memorization.
Have you seen Prince? The Little Prince. His ABCs are, every one of them are scriptures.
Who?
The Prince. The Little Prince.
The Little Prince?
Prince William's son.
Oh,
He knows his ABCs. A is a scripture.
by scripture.
By scripture.
Yeah, they used to teach it that way.
And there's a video on Facebook of him doing that. I'm like, amazing. This child is 5 years old.
No, littler kids can do that. Yeah, that's no biggie. And we should be teaching our children that too. That we are not coming anywhere near the potential of our children. All right? We should be teaching all of our babies to read. And that's going against almost all the stuff you hear in homeschool conventions. Who is it that says wait till they're 7 or 8 or 10 to teach them to read? The
Waldorf method?
No. This is a couple that hangs out at all the homeschool conventions. They say it's too early to teach them how to read. But anyway, and if I go on these homeschool Facebook pages, I get attacked for saying these things. The grammar Nazis come out and start to chew at me. But my vision is let's get back to historical levels of function of our children. Our children used to learn to read early, and they read the Bible. They didn't read baby books. And they memorized tons of stuff. They could write scriptures, speeches, Shakespeare, all kinds of stuff. They learned to memorize stuff like that. She sings really nicely. Reading aloud lights up your brain like sight reading music. It's a wonderful activity for your brain and for your children's brains. So having them read aloud is an excellent activity also.
Be of interest to them?
Huh?
Does it have to be of interest to them in particular? Because I read out loud to our high schooler U.S. history, and I make the little sit, but I don't know if they have to sit because I tell them to sit. But,
Ask them questions. Do your Charlotte Mason on them. we used to, on Sundays, we used to get invited to our pastor's house for lunch, and every person had to come up with something from the sermon, all right? And they went by age. The youngest kids got to go first, and they always got my stuff, and I had to think of something else. So if you ask questions of the kids when you're reading to them, they'll pay more attention. All right. What goes right, what goes wrong? I think if you start teaching the little kids to read early, you'll avoid some of the, quote, dyslexia and things like that. Dyslexia was identified by Dr. Carl Delicato back in 1959. He wrote his first book. And it's really straightforward to get rid of. Dyslexia is the real definition, if you look at all the neuropsych definition, is can't read as well as your IQ indicates you should be able to. Duh. So give us $1,500, we'll identify your child as dyslexic. Why isn't my child reading? Well, let's test them. Oh, their child isn't reading because they're dyslexic. Oh, what does dyslexia mean? It means your child can't read. Oh, okay. That's $1,500, please. So usually it involves having missed one of these developmental steps. You're right-handed and you're left-eyed. The cross-hand-eye dominance is well identified, being able causing reversals and also problems with long-term visual memory. All right, because it goes in one part of the brain, has to go across the corpus callosum, it gets flipped over, and that's where you get the reversals and so forth. Being neurologically organized, if you're right-handed, you should be right-eyed, right-eared, and right-footed. If you're left-handed, you should be left-eyed, left-eared, and left-footed. When you cross dominance, you're mixed-handed, or you're using the wrong hand. You're left-handed and you should be right-handed. You're going to get neurological organization. You're going to have problems with long-term memory, and you're going to have problems absorbing information. That's where you get the dyslexia labels. And that's how we fix it. We evaluate all those things. Sometimes we have to make them go back and creep and crawl, get the brain organized, find out which way the dominance should go, and then give them an intensive reading program, which we do on our programs, is we give an intensive reading to get them ahead. I don't want them just caught up. I don't believe in grade levels. Grade levels are made up. I love homeschoolers. Yes?
My son is mixed. He has mixed dominance, but he had to have surgery on his hands, and his left hand is much stronger than his right.
How old is he?
He's 9. I think he was supposed to be right-handed because he was showing signs of that, but because of the surgeries and his left hand being so much stronger, his therapist encouraged him to use his left hand, and now he uses his left hand. So should I try to swap that?
It depends.
Okay.
If you use the wrong hand, you can wind up with all kinds of problems. Even people that are bipolar are often using the wrong hand, because part of the organization of the brain is having a rational hemisphere to overcome the emotional hemisphere, to control it. If you don't have a good hemisphere definition of your brain, you don't have that good emotional control. So even to the extent of being bipolar could be problems that, and have problems with learning. So first of all, you have to determine which hand should be dominant. And that's a long discussion. Look at the genetics, okay? I talked about last week during cranial work, Dr. Jerry Hockman, jhockman at life.edu. You should run all your kids by him, all right? You should all have the cranial adjustment to make sure stuff is moving properly. And I've seen step changes in function with him, all right? And also hair swirls. If you look at the hair, this is right-handed, that's left-handed. If you have multiple hair swirls, you're in trouble. That's why I recommend cranial work, because I've seen hair swirls change with one adjustment, go from 3 to 1. I've seen double opposing hair swirls that are very dyslexic kids. And so your subdominant foot should be bigger. So if you're right-handed, your left foot should be bigger. One foot's always a little bigger than the other. With my son, it was like a half a size. It's quite significant. There's other things, you know. I can look at spillage and different things to see which hand should be dominant. But yeah, hand, eye, ear, and so forth. When I've had children, I had a little girl from China that had, there's some kind of in utero thing where it wraps around and the fingers don't develop. So she had no fingers on her right hand. So we had to move her to the left. But you want to try to avoid that if you can. It's not as bad for girls as boys. Boys, the brain is more lateralized. The corpus callosum is smaller. That speaks, the hemispheres speaking to each other. So that's why more boys get labeled dyslexic and so forth.
I've got a question. Alexis had a lazy eye. Her left eye was...
Yeah, I know what lazy eye is.
Well, they didn't even say it was lazy. Really, just put a patch over it and make her put a patch over the right eye. But they never labeled her dyslexic, but I see dyslexia. It's almost fixed itself, but I still see the dyslexia.
I've never seen patching an eye fix the problem. You have to do specific activities. You have to get the brain controlling all those eye muscles.
Well,
all right.
what we did when her mother had her stroke and her mother was doing the cross, we had Alexis do those too.
That's good. Yeah.
But I still see the...
Well, check the dominance, hand, eye, ear, and all that. But, you know, when I'm... Where's my pen? When I'm evaluating a child, what's it doing over here? When I'm evaluating a child, who's... I need somebody to pick on.
Oh, great.
Well, you're a cute model. Come here.
Oh, thank you.
So when I'm evaluating a child, their eyes, I have these wonderful little light I got from my insurance agent, which I want to find a bunch more because these are excellent. I start at 18 inches straight out from the bridge of the nose, and I slowly bring it into 2.5 inches. And watch their eyes that they can track in. Good girl. She's doing very well. If an eye goes out or in or stays in when I come out, I know we need to do eye exercises. And I make sure they can track up and down and side to side smoothly. You did very well.
I had an astigmatism in high school, so I had to do all those exercises, and I've been doing it ever since. So.
Well, it'll actually improve your vision. So there's other type of eye anomalies, like with the brain injured kids or with autistic kids, they often use their peripheral vision and not using their central vision. And we have to do specific things to develop central vision. But that's all part of our evaluation and program process that we do. She's quite a singer, that one. Okay, I'm going to take a couple minutes to do math. I'm only going to hit this. I can do it in more depth later. For math, there's 2 things you need to know. The process of doing arithmetic you learn visually. Math facts you learn auditorily. 7 times 8 is, 3 times 9 is, 6 times 8 is, you hear it in your head, right? We teach it auditorily. The process of doing arithmetic you learn visually by watching it being done. Separate those 2. So in your Saxon math book, where you're doing those time drills for math facts and putting down the wrong answer, that is not teaching you math facts. Got it? That is just an exercise in frustration. So, and I'm jumping right to the top of math teaching right now. So I teach, you have how to teach the math facts in your handouts. And I use where's my bag of tricks? I use the big math fact flashcards, which are supposed to be right here. Where'd they go? They aren't here. I put them in this bag and brought them in, and they've disappeared. Oh well. You know the big math fact flashcards?
Are they under your stack of papers?
Huh?
Are they under your stack of papers there? Next to the computer.
Oh, there they are. You're right. Thank you. Use the big flashcards. And use the ones with the answer on the back. And I think Lakeshore Learning has some of these. Rebecca has these. So we use the flashcards not because we're teaching it visually, but we're teaching it auditorily, and we want them to say the right number. So we use the flashcards to have them looking right at the flashcards. They will say the number, and they'll say the math facts. So you'll start with a family, okay, the fives, and you'll go through all the fives, and they'll say the whole math fact, okay? Once you think they know them, turn them over, and again, have them say the whole thing and provide the answer, and see if they get them all right. Then you move to the next family. The instructions are in that paper that you have there. And I've tried every perturbation type of thing of teaching math facts. This works, all right? I like the big cards because when I'm trying to flash them for the child, my fingers don't get in the way of them seeing the whole thing. Don't use the little triangle things or the things with weird stuff with the number up here. I want them to look at it and have the right answer, all right? You can also make recordings of the math facts and have them listen to them into their dominant ear and do it that way. So memorize the math facts that way. What do you learn the first 6 years of math? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, percent, fractions, and decimals. Do you already know how to do those? So you don't need to buy a $75 book to know how to teach your child. Got it? I use a textbook, not because I'm a slave to the number of problems in this book, just to make sure I cover all the processes. All right? So a process is a new type of problem you're teaching the child. So the instructions I give the parents are 75% visual input once a day for 10 minutes for each new process. If you go longer than that, the intensity goes down, the learning goes down. I know you feel like you're cheating your kid, but you don't make them do an hour of math. But if you really want them to learn it, you input with intensity that way. So it's 75% visual input. 75% means you work 3, they try to work the 4th. So take a process. Okay, we're adding 2 numbers in a column here. This is a process. Over here, we're adding a number with 3 numbers below. That's a different process. Okay, so input how to do that process with the child until they're successful at doing it, and then go to the next process. I don't care how many problems are in this book. Don't worry about it. This is Spectrum Math, which is like $12 a book. So I had this talk in South Carolina, and I talked about how much I dislike sex and math. And by the end, I said, we'll have a book burning, sex and math books out in the parking lot after the talk here. I'm an engineer. I've been through high-level math. I love math. And I hate sex and math. It doesn't teach you and keep you on a subject long enough to really learn it. It's a circular system. You're supposed to jump through the hoops. It's and by the end, you're supposed to know how to do it. Okay, it's 75% visual input. What do I mean by visual input? That means you learn the process of doing the arithmetic visually. So I want you to get out your math fact paper. Do you have your math fact paper here? Okay, I want you to read that. And while I'm reading that to you, I'm going to talk to you. Okay, no, you're supposed to be reading that paper. You're reading that paper and I'm talking to you. And you'll discover something. That you can't read the paper and listen to me at the same time, can you? All right, we do that to our children all the time. We're trying to show them something and we're talking at the same time. They can either watch what we're doing or listen to us. And if they could figure out why they felt the confusion, they'd say, will you please be quiet so I can see? All right? So either do your talking, explain the problem first, and then say watch, and then clamp your lips shut. You work 3 and have them work the 4th. Or if you need to break down the steps of the problem, write, put your pencil down, talk, write again, put your pencil down, talk. Don't write and make them watch at the same time, okay? Don't write and make them listen at the same time. Got it? Doesn't that make sense? I was the worst offender because I love math and I would go blah, 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 blah. And I confused my son and my sister and everybody else. So those are the 2 tricks. Now, what we do, you say, okay, you only do 10 minutes of math a day. For 5 minutes a day, I tell the parents, do math process review. Go back to a type of problem the child's had before. Remind them how to do it. And my instructions are 50% visual input, one process at a time, once a day for 5 minutes. All right? So that means pick out one type of process. You work 2, they work 2. You work 2, they work 2 until they can do it successfully. Because how many times have you had your kid forget how to do something they've had in the past? So you just input how to do it again. And that's really important. The key to teaching accelerated isn't that I taught it to them last week and it's gone. You're just going to input it again. And what if they forget it tomorrow? You input it again. Got it? What if they forget it the next day? You input it again. All right? Well, sometimes it's visual input and sometimes it's auditory input. But it's never phonics. No. I love you. Okay. So, and if you want them to do a math worksheet as an extra thing, you can do that later. But this is how you input how to do the math and move them through the processes. And just use an inexpensive book, or do you know what are those things called? Flippers. Do you know what flippers are? Flippers are cool. They're just this shingle things of all the types of math processes for elementary math on one thing. I'll go in the next room and show it to you. They have those at Homeschool Hangout too. So you have all the processes on one card. So you just show them how to do all those processes. So, and then when they're ready for algebra, I move into, percentage fractions, decimals, I use the Key Curriculum Press, very inexpensive. thorough review of addition of percentage fractions, decimals, and then I use their Algebra 1 and geometry is good. Another thing about math, we got a couple more minutes. Another thing about math, why are some kids absolutely abysmal at math? My son learned to read at college level by 7, and he could not do math. We started Algebra 1 3 times. I was pulling my hair out. I'm going, I am a failure, all right? I'm a total failure at teaching math. My son was teaching me. To do math, to be good at math, you have to be able to visualize. You have to be able to think in pictures and see spatial relationships. My son was the word king of the universe. He had no idea what a map was. He would get lost. I remember when we were in Salt Lake, he had to go 5 blocks that way and 4 blocks that way. He got lost, all right? So he just could not visualize spatial relationships at all. And that's why with the older kids, you have in your handout draw maps. I pulled this out when he was like 14. And he would sit and look at a map of the United States and draw it every day, just an outline drawing. And they have one at Homeschool Hangout that I used. I put it on the wall. It's just he would have to draw the outline of this United States and then start filling in the states. Once a day for 10 minutes. The next day you start with a clean sheet of paper. It was agony to start with. He hated it. And then one day he drew the whole United States from memory. And you know, when you're a homeschooler, you have, you know, House Beautiful, you have maps on the wall and all these wonderful decorations. He was walking down the hallway where these maps had been for 85 years. And he looked up and said, maps are cool. I went, thank you, Jesus. He actually saw them for the first time. And he went from at 14, starting Algebra 1, to having a degree in chemistry and math at 20. All right? It changed his brain. So I would absolutely recommend this activity for all of your children, is draw maps. That was an inspiration from the Lord, truly. With your little kids and kids with Down syndrome, they cannot visualize. And teaching them to visualize, teaching them to think in pictures. One of the things I do is I use picture, this isn't a good book. I need a simple picture book. Simple picture book. This is not a simple picture book. I would just hold up a picture, take it away, and have the child describe it back to me. So they start to remember visual information. All right, just picture. I use a simple coloring book to start with. I work with children with Down syndrome. They usually learn to read really well, and they're historically told they can't learn to do math. But teaching them how to visualize, there you go. Teaching them how to visualize gets them over that hump.